Count of three, I want everybody to raise their hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. So we're ready to go. All right, the first thing we're going to auction off here this afternoon is a gift basket from Maine Cabin Masters. And included in this is the basket, the show's name on an apron, a t-shirt, a mug, a keychain, a kitchen towel, grill implements, and much more. I don't know what the much more is. I haven't bored down through it yet, but whoever wins this can do that and get a good surprise. And I don't know if you know these people from Cabin Masters or not, but they've been over to our mill a couple of times. They've been on the show a couple of times, and I've sat around and had a beer with them a couple of times. And they are fun guys, I'm telling you, and there's a lady too. And it's worth getting this stuff. I'm telling you, they're a wonderful outfit. They do a lot for promoting our industry. So we're going to start off with a bid of $75. Who give me $75? Got 75 here, who give me 80? 75 going for 80? 75 going for 80? Got 80 over here. Got 80, who give me 90? 80 going for 90. Got 90. Was that a bid, or are you scratching your ear? Was that a bid? I guess not. Okay. Where were we? At 80? I got 80. Who give me 90? 80 going for 90. Got 90 up here. Who give me 100? 90 going for 100. 90 going for 100. I need 100. Who give me 100? 90 going for 100. 90, got 100. Who give me 110? 100 going for 110. Got 100. 110. 110 anywhere? 100 going once. 100 going twice. Got 100 up here. Okay. 100 going for 110. Is that 110? Okay, going for 120. It's a lot to keep track of here. Okay, 110 going for 120. Who give me 120? I got 110. 110? Who give me 120? 110 going once? 110 going twice? Sold right up there to John Williams for 110. Thank you very much, John. Okay, the next item is this scent lock scent tote. Okay, that's kind of a strange term, and a scent tote. I guess it's a tote that you carry your scents around in, and that's SCENTS. All right, and it's waterproof with a sealed lid, and it's good for all that. But if you're a fisherman, you're going on a fishing trip, think of the beer you can haul in that thing. You know, it's a lot of good uses for it here. So we're going to start off with a bid of $30. Who give me 30? Got 30. Who give me 40? 30 going for 40. Got 30. 30 going for 40. 40, 40, 40, 30 going for, got 40 over here. Who give me 50? 40 going for 50. 50 going for 60. 50 going for 60. 50 going for 60. 60 going for 70. 60 going for 70. Got 70. 70 going for 80. Got 80 going for 90. 80 going for 90. 90 anywhere. I got 80 going for 90. 80 going for 90. 80 going once. 80 going twice. Sold right here for $80. You almost got it. Okay. All right, the next thing I want you people to get a chance to buy is a Spiller axe. I'm spilling everything else over here. But the Spiller company, the Spiller family were making axes for 150 years, and they went out of business in 1965. But if you're interested in buying an implement that had a lot to do with the history of the timber industry here in Maine, this is a great item to buy right here. They made wonderful axes. Their factory was in Oakland. And I printed off a history of the Spiller family and their activities right here. So whoever wins the axe, I'll give this to you also. But this, it's been restored. It's got a handle. It's a hickory handle that was turned by the Amish here in Maine. And it's got a nice leather sheath. This is a great item right here. So I've seen it online, not this one, but I've seen a lot of them online for like $300. We're going to start this one off at 100. Who give me $100? The Spiller axe got 100 right here. 100 going for 125, 125, 125 going for 150. 150 anywhere. Got 125 going. Got 150. 150 going for 175. 150 going for 175. 150 going for 160. 160 anywhere. I got 150. Got 160 up back going for 170. 160 going for 170. Got 170 going for 180. 180 anywhere. I got 180 now going for 190. 190 anywhere. 180. He won't go high at 190. How about 190? 180 going for 190. 180 going for 190 anywhere? 180 going once? Got 190. 190 going for 200. 190 going for 2. 190 going for 2. 190 going once? Got 200. 200 going for 210. 2 going for 210. 210 anywhere? 200 going once? 200 going, got 200. 210, excuse me. 210 going, there's a lot to keep track of here, you know. 210 going for 220. 210 going for 220. Do I have 220 anywhere? I got 210, I got 220. 220 going for 230. 230 anywhere? 230, 220 going for 230. Got 220 up back, got 230. 230 going for 240. It's a wonderful implement. 230 going for 240. 240 anywhere? Got 240 going for 250. 250? Anybody give me 250 for this? 240 going once? 240 going twice? 240 sold. Very much. Thank you, Mike. Okay, the next item is a tour of a 3D printed home up at the University of Maine. And this is what it looks like. I was there when they did the grand opening of this last year. And this whole thing was built by a machine using nanocellulose. There's no solid wood in it. And of course, being in the lumber business, that's probably not good for me, but it's good for you. But anyway, it's a really, really interesting thing to see. So we're going to sell a tour of that. We're going to start off at $40. We'll give me $40 for a tour of this 3D building up at University of Maine. Okay, I got $40. Who give me 50? Got 50 up back going for 60. Got 60 going for 70. 70 going for 80. 70 going for 80. Got 70 going for 80. $80. It got 80 going for 90. Got 90 going for 100. Got 100, 110. 110, 120 anywhere? Got 110. Who give me 120? 110 going for 120. 110 going once. 110 going twice. Sold. It's a nice lady up back for 110. Okay, the next item is this hand-carved raccoon, which was carved by Josh Landry with a chainsaw. And this is a raccoon. It's absolutely beautifully done. And if you've ever wanted a pet raccoon, here's your chance. Okay? And I'll tell you another advantage. You get this raccoon, it won't be right in your garbage can. Okay? So this is really nicely done. And the value is $350, but we're going to start at $125. Who'll give me $125 for that raccoon? 125 anywhere? Looking for 125. Opening bid, 125. Okay, who got 125 over here? 125 going for 150. Anybody give me 150? Got 125? 125? How about 135? Anybody give me 135? 135? 125 going for 135. 125 going once? 125 going, got 135 over here. Okay, got it twice. 135 going for 145. 135 going for 145. 130, I've got him at 135. Who's going for 145? 145 anywhere? Got 135 over here. 135 going for 145. 135 going once. 135 going twice. Sold, 135. Right over here. Right over there to your right. Right over there. Thank you very much. So the next thing we have is this really nice Leopold bench, which was built by one of our members, Bruce Bender. And this is made from solid cedar. And you know, most of us have some woodlands that we wouldn't belong to this organization, and an awful lot of us that have woodland also have nice trails to hike on. So this is the perfect thing to have out at the end of your trail, you know, where you get out there and you say, well, about time to head back to the house. That'd be a great place to have a bench, sit it there, and you can watch the birds, watch the deer, and just enjoy the outdoors, enjoy your woodlot. So it's a great thing to sit out in the woods and relax. Because you don't have to take it out in the woods. If you want it in the kitchen or your back deck, that's fine too. As long as you buy it, you put it wherever you want. So we're going to start off with a bid of $75. Who'll give me $75 for this solid cedar bench? $75 anywhere? Looking for $75. Open and bid $75. How about, okay, I got 75. 75 going for 100. 75 going for 100. Got 100? Who'll give me 125? 100 up back going for 125. 125 anywhere? We got 100, looking for 125. 100 going once, 100 going twice, sold to the nice lady again up back for $100. Okay, the next thing we have to offer here is a tour of Robbins Lumber Company, which I'm fairly familiar with. We're located over in Searsmont. We saw eastern white pine. There's a picture of it here. There's a little bit of a misprint. It says we have a 1.2 megawatt power plant. It's actually 8.5 megawatts. And we have a couple of planer mills, and it's a nice modern operation because I'm a little prejudiced because I used to own it. But also, I'll throw in on this. I'll give you a woodlot tour right next to the sawmill. If anybody wants to come see the sawmill and the planer mill, I'll give you, if it's not 4 feet of snow, I'll give you a woodland tour also. So the opening bid on this is $100. Who give me $100? And, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, it says here, it can be up to 6 people. Actually, I'd take up to 10, as long as it's not more than 10, because then I have to have 2 tour guides. But I can handle 10. So up to 10 people, $100. Who give me $100? 10, I got 100 right here. Who give me 110? 100 going for 110? Got 110 going for 120? 120 anywhere? Got 110 going for 120? Got 120? Who give me 130? 130 anywhere? Got 130? How about 150? Got 130? Who give me 150? Got 150? Who give me 170? 170. Got 150? Got 170 up back going for 190. That's just a little under 200. 190. Who give me? I got 190. Who give me 200? Got 200. How about 225? Who give me 225? Got 200 going for 225. 225 going for 250. 225 right over here. 225 going for 250. 250 anywhere? Got 225 going for 250. Got 250. 250 going for 275. 275 going for 300. 275. 300 anywhere? Going for 300. 275 going for 300. 275 going once.
I gotta tell you, the jokes and the stories you get from Jimmy are way worth the money. I can guarantee you, having spent time with it. The stories you'll get will be worth more than that.
My jokes are so bad, I might have to pay you back a little, but we're at 275, I believe, right now. Who'll give me 300? 275 going for 300. Got 300 going for 325. 3 going for 325. 300 going for 325. The 300 was way up back. Okay, 300 going for 325. 325? Got 300 going for 325. He won't go over 325. Who'll give me 325? Got 325, who'll give me 350? 325, go over 350. 325, 350 anyway. I got 325. Going for 350. 350? 325 going once. 325 going twice. Sold, John Williams, 325. That's pretty good. Get $325 out of a former competitor. He used to own Williams Lumber Company. Thank you very much, John. Okay. All right, by the way, this goes with the spell of that. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. The next item is a 12-arm chandelier. And if some of you people aren't from Maine, that's arm, like 12 arms. Made by Woodland owners Chris Bexvort. And this is a beautiful thing. It's made of steel and a turned piece of wood in the center. It really is a piece of art. This is really, really nice. So we're going to start that off. It's less than being worth $475. We're going to start it off $150. Who'll give me $150 for this beautiful candle chandelier? $150 anywhere? $150? It's worth a lot more than that. Who'll give me $150? Okay, who'll give me $75? $75? $75 for the chandelier. Who'll give me $50? $50 anywhere. 50? Yeah, it comes with the candles, right? I got 50, okay? 50 going for 75. 50 going for 75. Anybody give me 75? We're going to let him steal this for $50. 50 going once. Got 75. Got 75, who'll give me 100? 75 going for 100. 75 going once. 75 going twice. Got 100 right here. Okay, who'll give me 125? 100 going for 125. 100 going for 125? 125 anywhere? We got 100? 100 going once? 100 going twice? Sold ready for $100. Thank you very much. You even got the tote to take it home in. Beautiful. Okay, now this is the last item, right, Tom? There's a woodland tour with Tom Doak. And this really means a lot to me and the organization, and I hope to you folks. Consider what Tom has done for us all these years and what he's done for the state of Maine, even before he was with this organization. I hope we bid this one up really good because, you know, spending a half a day with Tom Doak is worth a lot of money, even if you aren't in the woods, because he's such a classy guy. So I want to see this really go. And I mean that, Tom, every word of it. We're going to start at $150. We'll give me $150. Got 150 over here. We'll give me 200. 150 going for 200. 150 going for 200. Come on, we need more than 100. Got 200. Okay, 200 going for 250. 2 going for 250. 200 going for 250. Got 250. 250 going for 300. We got 250 over here. Who'll give me 300? Got 300 up back. Okay, way up back. 300. 3 going for 350. 3 going for 350. 3 got 350. Who'll give me 4? Up back, but not quite so far up back. Got 350 going for 400. Anybody over here? 350 going for 400. 350 going for 400. 400 anywhere? 350 going once. Got 400. 400 going for 450. 4 going for 450. 450 going for 5. I got 450 up back going for 5. Anybody want to give me 500? It's certainly worth it. 450 going for 5. 450. Anybody for 500? 450 going once. 450 got 500 going for 550. 500 going for 550. The 500 is down front here. 500 going for 550. Got 550 going for 6. 550 going for 600. $600 anywhere. We got 550. Got 600. 600 going for 650. 600 going for 650. 600 going for 650 once. 600 going twice. Sold John Williams, $600. Thank you very much, John. And thank you, everybody. Good job.
How about another round of applause for Jimmy, huh? Jimmy. And I appreciate the bidding on that, so. I'm not sure where, Jen, where are we in the program? Allison, right? Allison, where are you? Allison, right here. Come on up, Allison. Oh, you'll be great. You're always good. Just let me have the, I know her.
Yeah.
I know her. So Allison, is actually it says she's director of the Forest Health and Monitoring Division, but, and the state I'm on, so. And she really administers a lot of the state forestry, quarantine programs. She's the expert on insects and disease and insects. Whenever I have an issue on insects or where a member sends a note in or something, I always send it right to Allison. And as I mentioned this earlier, I think today, from my point of view, you know, the biggest threats to the forest have to do with forest pests and insects. But she's going to specifically talk about an issue around spruce budworm, because there's a lot going on in the spruce budworm, and you're going to hear a lot more about it in the next year or two, and the issues that are coming. So we asked her to come talk about what's going on there and what the strategy is in dealing with this. This is a native pest, but what the strategies are and what you should know about this insect. So, Allison?
Great, thanks, Tom. So kind of take it, right?
Yeah, she needs to do something with it.
Oh, there, okay. I think I've got it. We'll see. So good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for showing up for this conversation about spruce budworm. I'm just going to give a brief overview of this insect. I think probably a lot of folks in this room are familiar with it, even though the last outbreak came to a close in the early 90s. That was the last time we really saw a lot of budworm in the forest in Maine, and we're starting to see it again. So as far as spruce budworm, as Tom had mentioned, this is a native insect. I have in that life cycle diagram there, I have the life stage that's present right now in that little box. That is the overwintering larva, or the L2. So right now, while we're out enjoying the snow, they're cozied up in a little silken hibernaculum waiting for the spring. In the spring, the larvae they will emerge. They're just a couple millimeters long at that stage. And so they can't really take bites out of whole needles at that stage. So they're going to be mining into the buds. They're going to be eating pollen from the pollen cones. And they're also going to be mining the needles as they come out of their hibernaculums in the spring. And that's going to happen in early May. And then by late May, early June, they're free feeding on the needles. And as they feed, they're really messy feeders. They eat just parts of the needles, and they also create some silk. They make little shelters where they can hide. And between that messy feeding and all the silk, the needles kind of are attached to the twigs of the tree. And so when you have big populations, the trees kind of take on a reddish hue as those needles dry out. You'll see these partially chewed needles attached to the twigs, and the trees having a reddish color to them. So the caterpillars, they wind up feeding in mid to late June. They pupate on the branches usually, and then the moths will emerge in late June or early July, or up to mid-July. And at some stages, there's just thousands, millions of moths there during the peaks of the outbreaks. Right now, there's an outbreak that's been going on in Quebec for decades. It started before I started my career, and they've been dealing with defoliation for decades in that province. And so there's lots of moths being produced there, and they can be picked up on currents in the atmosphere and brought to new places like Maine. So the moths mate and they lay eggs. Those eggs are laid on needles in sort of shingle-like masses. So they're all together on the needles, and they hatch into first instar larvae, and then very quickly transform or molt into the second instar, or L2. So they're unfed at that stage where they then go into winter. And so budworm is, as I've mentioned, outbreak a few times. It's an eruptive insect, so its populations escape natural enemies every once in a while. And that happened 3 times in the last century in Maine. And I just wanted to give a little bit of context as to where our forest is now as it relates to spruce budworm. And so as far as our spruce fir resource in Maine, in the overall spruce fir forest types, which includes some forest types that aren't really dominated by spruce budworm hosts, we have about 6 million acres of forest land, or about 34% of our forest land. About 84% is in those forest types that are dominated by things like balsam fir, white spruce, red spruce, black spruce, those trees that are more favored by the budworm. And those areas are most prevalent in the down east regions of Maine and the northern regions of Maine. And the map that I show here comes from the 5-year annual report from the forest inventory data. So that's available from our website. I apologize, I know it's a really messy graphic, but you can dive right into the data on that dashboard. And I encourage you to visit it and explore it a little bit. It really is pretty consumable. As far as those forests, about 40% of that area is in the age range where you start to become the trees start to become really vulnerable to the damage from the budworm, so they suffer more damage, and that's in the age classes of 60 years and older. And we do have quite a plug of softwood that's aging into the 40 to 60 year class as well. So those are producing the cones and the pollen, which is really good food for spruce budworm. So looking at it another way, about 1 in every 2 trees in Maine is a spruce or a fir, so the food for spruce budworm. Of that 50%, almost 3/4 are balsam fir. And so balsam fir and white spruce are the preferred hosts for spruce budworm. So about 3/4 of those trees are a preferred host for spruce budworm. So kind of the short message about that is we have a lot of food out there for spruce budworm on the landscape. And the reason that many folks in this room are probably familiar with this pest is that, as I mentioned, it has these outbreaks, and the most recent outbreak was really pretty epic. The blue shaded area on the map shows the area of Maine that was defoliated from 1955 to present. And you can see in the 80s, 70s, and 80s outbreak, at the peak of defoliation, we had 7.7 million acres of forest land affected in a single year. So really a huge block of our spruce fir forests impacted by that defoliation. And the photo on the bottom kind of shows you what those forests look like when you have all those reddened needles hanging on to the crowns. We saw some of that in northern Maine this year. Those needles do eventually erode from those canopies, and so if you were to fly over those trees now, they look pretty green. The area in red on the map, that is the area where spruce budworm defoliated spruce and fir stands in Maine in the last century. So it kind of gives you the area where in the last century, spruce budworm reached outbreak populations. And the outbreak that we experienced in the 70s and 80s was really a regional outbreak as it is today. So in the 70s and 80s, it covered about 136 million acres of forest land across Canada and the northeastern United States. And those who were in the industry or landowners at the time, they know that we had millions of acres of forest land that were treated with insecticides. The insecticides used in the last outbreak included things like carbamates and organophosphates, and eventually biorational insecticides like BTK, which is one of the insecticides being used today. There are some studies, a whole bunch of studies on the mortality of spruce and fir in forest stands, both that had control and that did not. In one of those studies, they found that in the untreated stands, balsam fir mortality reached 83 to 96%, and the mortality rates for red spruce reached 25 to 45%. And that's the mortality. There's also growth reduction associated with that feeding damage because the tree doesn't have as many needles to produce the energy that needs to grow. Around 25 million cords of spruce and fir were killed statewide, and lots of loss of value to forest industry, hundreds of millions of dollars. There are also impacts beyond the forest economy that sometimes folks don't think about first when they're thinking about spruce budworm, but changes to forest structure and composition, impacts to riparian areas, the areas around lakes and streams, to wildlife habitat, recreation, tourism, and forest policies and practices, which is something that we deal with quite a bit on a day-to-day basis. So the reason I'm here talking today is related to recent activity of spruce budworm. So we've had a number of years where we knew populations were building south of the St. Lawrence Seaway. Beginning in 2013, we had a collaborative that was put together called the Spruce Budworm Task Force that was led by the University of Maine, the Maine Forest Service, and the Maine Forest Products Council. And one of the things that came out of that was a document that was a preparation and response plan for the coming outbreak. In 2014, I'll talk about a little bit later, the Canadian Forest Service and provincial governments and private industry started a large-scale experiment called Early Intervention Strategy to see if they could help control budworm outbreaks before they took off. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. In 2020, we had our first reports of large budworm larvae in the forest. And for most people, that doesn't seem like a big deal. But if you think about it, the last time we saw them was in the early 90s. So it's a big deal. We were able to walk up to trees and find the budworm larvae on the trees. We're not like the birds. We're not great at finding them, but we could find them on the forest trees. In 2021, we mapped really light damage, exceedingly light damage in our aerial surveys of about 821 acres, or 841 acres, sorry. And then this past year, we mapped about 3,500 acres of significant damage in the forests of northwestern Maine. And these were quite visible from a plane. Doesn't really show up well in this lighting environment, but the trees were visibly red from the air over that area. That's the areas shown on the map to the right, and the small yellow square up in the upper left-hand corner of the map shows the area of the state that was impacted by those. And then landowners reported additional areas with similar defoliation or damage in areas around Cross Lake as well. We followed up those surveys with some ground surveys. We used the FEDIS method, which is a method of calculating defoliation impact that's repeatable, and it's used in the provinces as well. And what it does is it basically quantifies the missing foliage on an annual basis. So you look at the current year foliage, and then you look back in other years. And we've been doing this method of assessment for a number of years now, and those numbers have been very low as far as the percent defoliation. Mike, is it like around 10% that they've been in the last few years? So yeah, under 10% 2 years ago, under 6% last year. This year we had a wide range of values, and the larger the circle on that map, the higher level of defoliation. Yes, the good news is most of that defoliation was on current year foliage, so meaning it was mostly just 1 year of damage, and that fir trees and spruce trees, they hold their needles for quite a number of years, so they can tolerate a number of years of defoliation. And I should emphasize the FEDIS method quantifies defoliation from all sources, so it's not just from spruce budworm. So as I mentioned, the last outbreak, there was a very large response in aerial spray of insecticides. I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the management approaches that are on the ground today across the continent. So in Minnesota, they have a fair amount of spruce budworm defoliation every year. This year was a banner year for them. They had the most spruce budworm defoliation map that they have had since 1961. So things are changing in Minnesota as well, but they don't do a lot of intervention with insecticides, and they do some forest management, including salvage harvests for budworm. In places like Quebec and our strategy in the last outbreak in Maine, they use a foliage protection strategy. And so that basically is keeping the trees alive so that you can recoup the commercial value from them. In Quebec, they treat 5 to 10% of the affected area a year. So there's a lot of trees that are still dying in that outbreak. And we've seen evidence of that from things like the wildfire smoke that we experienced 2 summers ago, changing our air quality. And then, as I mentioned, in New Brunswick, they're using an early intervention strategy to manage spruce budworm. This goes beyond New Brunswick, but New Brunswick is where they've done a lot of the work on the ground. And the basis of an early intervention strategy is really being able to detect the populations of spruce budworm as they are rising. So spruce budworm's on the landscape. It's there, it's a native insect. And it's kept in check by a whole bunch of natural mortality factors under our usual conditions. And so a whole bunch of really smart people in Canada got together, and they identified the threshold at which the budworm could escape those natural mortality factors and erupt into an outbreak. And the threshold is the number of larvae on the branch. And so it's 7 larvae per branch or more, and you can expect the budworm to continue to build and build into these outbreak populations. And the approach is to look at the populations over the whole landscape and push down those building populations as they grow so that you don't have them escaping natural enemies. And the way they're pushed down is using targeted insecticide applications using narrow spectrum insecticides. So the products being used are tebufenicide, which is it's a molt hormone mimic, and Bacillus thuringiensis christaki, so BTK. So those are the two products that are being used to basically add mortality to the natural mortality factors that are important in keeping budworm below outbreak thresholds. And both of those are really targeted to lepidopteran insects, so your butterflies and moths. They are, they break down quickly in the environment. In the case of BTK, it's a matter of days. In the case of tebufenicide, it's a week or a week and a half when they break down in the environment. The approach is applied at a landscape scale, so you're potentially targeting populations that are really quite distant from each other in any given year. And the approach is an annual look at those populations on the landscape. And in New Brunswick, they've had great success in keeping the outbreak from developing in that province, where in Quebec, the outbreak has continued to build and right up to their border. And in Maine, it's been applied on large ownerships since about 2021, with about 12,000 acres treated to date in Maine over 3 years or 4 years. So I talked about the overwintering larvae. So those are the L2s. And this map here shows where the overwintering larval populations reach a threshold where they would be considered for treatment under the early intervention approach. And so the areas in sort of the darker orange or the oranges are areas that would be that 7 larvae per branch threshold. And the areas in yellow are 3.5 larvae per branch up to 6.5 larvae per branch. So these are areas that would be potentially considered for treatment under an early intervention approach to managing spruce budworm. And that's about 294,000 acres. The model changes on as more data comes in on the populations of spruce budworm in that area. So it is a large acreage. And about 40,000 acres of that is small woodlot owners. So I mentioned before that the Spruce Budworm Task Force was formed in 2013. It's had periods of a lot of activity and periods with less activity. And as you can imagine, the activity of the task force is picking up again. This year, the landowners in northern Maine and, well, throughout Maine, really, the larger landowners, along with Maine Woodland owners, have formed a landowner collaborative to help coordinate response to spruce budworm, and they have joined the task force leadership team. And we're going to be continuing to work together moving forward on managing this problem. And one of the things that you may have seen in the news recently is that Senator Collins and others have worked to secure $12 million of funding to help respond to spruce budworm in Maine in the coming year. That's what I have. I'm happy to take any questions or discussion. Lloyd. Hold on. So the question was, is the fur fraction the same as it was in 72, 74? And no, I think there's less fur on the landscape now, and it's younger fur for the most part. Yeah. Larry.
Allison, we've been participating in a little citizen science program between New Brunswick and Maine for, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7, 8 years now. Does that have any value?
So the program that Larry's talking about is the Budworm Tracker Program, and the value in that is helping to determine the timing of flights of the budworm. So we do have a number of traps where we monitor populations. They go out in June and they come in September. And so we know how many budworm are coming into an area, but we don't know when they're coming into an area. And what the Budworm Tracker Program can do is help to tell us when we're getting large inflights of moths from other areas, because of the timing of their development is based on basically the temperatures where they develop. We do have a light trap system that helps us with that, but it is helpful to know those details.
Probably one more question. Move on.
So I will say that Mike Parisio, who runs our Budworm program, and I are going to be around for the day. So if you do have questions that come up later, we're more than happy to talk to you about Budworm or other forest insects and diseases.
Thank you, Allison. We've been. So we've been, I was stepped out of the room, but we're a part of the, we've been asked to be part, as an organization, a part of the group that's working on this, because we have a number of members in that that Cross Lake area, northern Maine, that northeast. Yeah, that northeast corner, that area is a little significant number of small ownerships. And, and helping members who might be interested, or landowners, small landowners that might be interested in getting involved in the intervention strategy of how to do it and help working with those folks. So I think one thing we'll be doing is working with the Forest Service and others about helping some of the small landowners in that northeast part, in particular, navigate through the outbreak that's coming, and well, it's here. So just wanted to make that clear. See, that's why you'll hear more from us in the next couple of newsletters or ongoing about our work there to try to help those landowners up that way in particular. So. Allison is always responsive. As I mentioned, whenever I have a question, she's been always, and her staff are always responsive. So I want to introduce our newest, I pointed it out earlier, but I want to introduce our newest member of this organization. She's Olivia comes to us actually from Nebraska. So and she graduated from she's at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln with a degree in fisheries and wildlife and conservation biology and a minor in urban forestry. She's been here since September?
16th.
And we have she's hired in a cooperative arrangement we have with the Natural Resource Conservation Service to really help landowners take advantage of a number of the cost share programs that are available. We as an organization use those programs all the time for management plans, timber stand improvement practices. Just in the last year, we have done timber stand improvement on several hundred acres on Maine Woodland owners' properties, lands in our land trust. And these programs are underutilized, but they're a great benefit, frankly, to landowners. So we wanted to let our members know a little bit more about these programs and demystify them a little bit. So part of Olivia's job is to help anybody participate in these programs who wants to participate. So Olivia, you're on. So thank you.
Yeah. Sure, this is what you guys have all been waiting all day for. It's this moment right now. Does it go like this? The clicker, click, click, click. Click. Whoa, too many clicks. I like to start everything out with some technical difficulties. So Tom already introduced me, but I'm Olivia, the Forestry Outreach Coordinator. Still kind of new to this, but I think I kind of know what I'm doing. I have enough confidence to come up here and talk like I know what I'm doing, and that's what really matters, right? So the NRCS has a lot of different cost sharing programs, a lot of different things that they do. And so one thing that they are really known for is the technical assistance. This technical assistance is it's free. It's at no cost to you, right? And who doesn't like free stuff? I personally am a big fan of free stuff. And another option is financial assistance. So usually what people end up doing is they come in, they have questions about their land, and they can get all of this expert advice for free. Can you hear me better now? Yes? Okay, perfect. Sorry. So, like I was saying, you can come in, you have questions about your land, you can get all of those expert advice. Who doesn't like a good expert? Somebody who knows what they're talking about, right? And then along with that advice comes financial assistance. So you might end up going in and you need some advice and you end up with a conservation plan for either soil management or water management, or you have some issues with wildlife habitat on your land. So like a lot of people might have all these woodlands and they want to see more birds, more species specific to Maine, or some of the species that are like of greatest concern to Maine. So animals that might have declining habitat or population reduction due to a lot of different issues, which could be mitigated with some of the cost sharing programs that the NRCS has. So if you want to see more animals, financial assistance can help you curate your land to assist in that goal, right? And so like erosion control, nutrient and pest management, a lot of different things you can get help with, or even just advice with. So we're gonna click, right? So two of the bigger conservation and cost share programs that they have is EQIP and CSP. So they're very similar, but they're also very different, kind of like squares and rectangles, right? So EQIP is going to be like the entry level cost share program that most people are going to be participating in. And so you can kind of see they might address similar things, but CSP, the Conservation Stewardship Program, is a little more in depth and it's a little more work. So you can see they're both going to address environmental issues on your property, but the CSP is kind of there to enhance the practices that you already have going on your land. And so in EQIP, or the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, is going to be ideal for new or existing landowners, not necessarily people who have been doing it forever. Not to say that you can't just do EQIP year after year after year after year if you would like. I mean, who wouldn't want a nice short-term project to keep their hands busy, right? And so the program focus is going to be a little bit different as well because they are different length and projects. So like EQIP is going to be 1 to 3 year projects, whereas your CSP is going to be longer 5-year projects. So they're 5-year contracts and then you can renew again, and it might end up being like 10 years that you're working on a project. And so some of the things that you can focus on might be similar. So like invasive species management or some pest management on your land. There's not necessarily like specific like pesticide applications that you can do, but there are like invasive projects that you could participate in that might also address some similar issues that you're having on your project or on your property. And so some of the supplemental programs that go in with these cost sharing programs are EQIP and CSP. So Act Now was started to kind of help accelerate the time frame of people getting their forest management plans done. So you have a woodlot, you don't know what you need done, you have the advice from a forester, you end up signing up for a forest management plan. EQIP Act Now is supposed to help you get that out of the door. Ideally, within 1 to 3 months, you've gone to the NRCS, you've talked to the FSA, you've registered with the FSA, you've gotten a TSP, you have your payment, and you have your forest management plan. And then there's also newer within the last, I believe, year or so, they started the Climate Smart Ag and Forestry, which is basically another subset of activities aimed at increasing ag and forest systems resilience to climate change, while also trying to reduce that carbon footprint. So everybody's talking about climate change. This is another way to kind of up your application for funding, essentially. And we also have there's some NRCS booth downstairs. And then we also have Sean here with us too, who can kind of elaborate more on that climate smart stuff, but I don't want to take up too much of our time for the next person. So like I mentioned, the Climate Smart Ag and Forestry is a subset of conservation activities that they have identified as being great in increasing like your land's productivity, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, and improving the ecosystem services on your property. So EQIP is going to offer the financial incentive for landowners to adopt these practices. And then these practices have been identified as like, these are great for the environment and they help with climate change. And it's going to add points to your application and it looks great and it helps your land, right? So like I mentioned, the Maine Inland Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. It's a little bit different than Nebraska, so I keep getting them mixed up. But so there's threatened and endangered species, which we all know, right? And then we have species of greatest concern, which have been identified because they're not quite threatened, they're not really endangered, but they are at risk of either having population declines or their habitat is endangered or threatened or things like that. And we want to protect these species and keep them from, ending up on a threatened or endangered list. And so, like I mentioned before, you can use some of these conservation practices like habitat restoration and management or invasive species management. All of these things can be outlined in a forest management plan or another type of conservation plan if you don't necessarily own forested land, to help address some of the issues that are involved with some of these threatened and endangered species. One thing that is important to note is there's eligibility requirements. So they're really basic, right? Do you have a social security number? Can you be identified by the United States of America, right? Most people here probably already have that. You have to prove that you have control over your land for the entirety of a contract. So if you have an EQIP contract and it's 1 to 3 years, you have to prove that you have control over that land for that 1 to 3 year contract, or for CSP, the 5-year contract. So maybe you're leasing land, but you don't own it. You just have to have something that proves that you're in charge of that land and you're making the decisions on that land for the extent of that contract. You have to make less than $900,000 a year, and then you have to be the person who's in charge of making those decisions, right? And that's just for a producer. So your land also has eligibility requirements as well. So it has to be ag, cropland, grassland, pasture, or non-industrial private forest land, right? And then it has to be in compliance with highly erodible wetlands. You have to have a farm track number, which is really important to get started at all. We'll kind of go over that in the next slide. Financial management, so like who's in charge of the money and the decision making. And then is it free of marijuana growth? Because this is a federal program, it's federal money. So we talked about the Farm Service Agency and a farm track number. So like step one, before you even get to planning, is visiting the Farm Service Agency. So every NRCS field office has an FSA or a Farm Service Agency office down the hall from it. And so that's where you start. You have to check and make sure that your land is essentially recognized in the system or has a farm track number. So you just go in, fill out a sheet of paper, talk with the FSA, and then if you really want, you can walk down the hallway and talk to the NRCS about having your land evaluated or getting some of your questions answered right away. Once that FSA number comes through, you can essentially start working right away on getting this plan, getting some advice, filling out your applications, determining your eligibility for which programs you want to participate in. Once you have filled out all of your applications, decided which program you want to participate in, then your application is going to be ranked. And so all of these rankings are done individually by the local field offices. And then once your application has been ranked and accepted, you'll get a notification about whether or not you can start implementing those practices outlined in your plan. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. I just highlighted a few of the available forestry practices. So like forest management plans, those are great. Those are easy, simple thing to do. And it's great for your forest and planning, essentially your woodlands legacy, right? Forest management, designs, assessments, forest farming, a lot of different things that you can do. And it's free money, essentially. Oops, that is the last slide. So we went through this really quick, but we have Sean here, who's forester in the Scarborough field office. I'll be back there willing to talk to anybody, answer any of your questions. And then the NRCS also has a booth downstairs with a lot of different people who can answer more questions than I might be able to. But I'll be here all day, and Sean will be here for a little bit as well. Does anyone have a question right now, immediately and pressing on your mind? Otherwise, I'll be back there walking around. No?
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you, Olivia. I think it sounds like these are complicated programs. I personally used it myself on my own woodland. This, as I say, the organization uses them a lot on our lands. They're not that complicated. The funding is great. It's very, it's very good funding. It's not as, I think people think of these programs as difficult to deal with, but they're not. And they can really benefit you dramatically as a landowner. So I really encourage you to just think about them. Olivia is available anytime to help with, part of her job is to demystify it for anybody. Also work with foresters. Not every forester, you have to be a technical service provider, forester under NRCS in order to deliver these programs. Your forester may or may not be a TSP, but they could become one, or we can help you find a forester that is. But I really encourage you to think about these programs. If nothing else, for just a forest management plan, much of the cost of these plans and practices are covered by these payments. And frankly, it's not that difficult, but part of the job for Olivia is to help you work through those. And we'll be adding a second person that'll focus on wildlife activities. So we'll be having two folks to help our members and any small landowner participate in these programs. So I really encourage you to think about it, and you're welcome to call Olivia anytime you have a question, even just thinking about it, and she can help you walk through it. Now I get the pleasure of introducing Mike Parisio. Mike has spoken, I think, several times in this group, and he's a forest entomologist with the Maine Forest Service. A lot of experience with invasive pests. He grew up in New York and has a master's of science degree in forest entomology, and has done graduate work with some of the biological controls, particularly on emerald ash borer. And we always like to update folks at the annual meeting about the insect and disease issues. And Mike going to talk not just about insects, I think, but also throw in some information about diseases as well, right? The whole thing, but because there's always something new and something else going on in the forest. So Mike, welcome, and the floor is yours.
All right, so I'm glad everybody got like a 10-15 minute break, but now it's time to get back to bugs and disease. So we're gonna go right back to forest health and talk about some of the things that may be affecting your woodlot. So I always like talking to this crowd because I know people do make the long trip from far and wide. So it's good to talk to people from around the state and see what people are dealing with in different parts. So like Allison mentioned, one of my major programs right now is Spruce Budworm, but since she addressed that, I'll skip right over that. But we'll see how long this takes to get through. So for those that might be new to the Maine Woodland Owners Organization, this is a little bit about what we do. So the Maine Forest Service Insect and Disease Lab, we're really based out of Augusta, but fortunately in recent years we've been growing. So we have kind of two fully staffed offices, one here in Augusta and then another office in Old Town. And in addition, we have a bunch of field staff. So like you can read on this thing, a lot of what we do is providing some of that pest and disease diagnostic work to help you know what you might be dealing with. Again, there's a lot of things that come and go that you may not be familiar with, and certainly it seems like every year there's just more and more things showing up. So don't feel bad if something you're seeing out in your woodlot is something you have no idea about, because it may well be new to the state, new to your area, and yeah, that's just kind of reality now, and that's the trend we deal with. So yeah, so in addition to that work, we do a bunch of different programs, just kind of keeping an eye on things so we can alert people ahead of time, you know, where certain things are popping up, where they're increasing, where they're receding and stuff. So we do a variety of trapping programs and things like that. At the end of the year, you know, this time of year, we're busy working on reports. So we try to get as much of this information into the hands of the people that need it. So we have a variety of annual reports, but really helpful, you know, during the growing season, we're always producing our condition reports, which is typically a monthly production. And yeah, there's a lot of the things you might be seeing. So if you're not on that mailing list, I'll have a slide at the end that shows you how to get signed up for that. So you can just get those regular updates on current events. And again, those things change from month to month and year to year, certainly. So, and then, yeah, you'll see some stuff on quarantine stuff. So some of the, of that stuff, we do still administer a bunch of forestry related quarantines that, again, may affect you based on, you know, any products coming off of your woodlots, if you're sending them far and wide, where they may travel and what sort of agreements you might need to get your products to the mill or anything like that. So we'll talk about some wins and some losses. So I'm going to start with brown-tail moth, and I'm going to call this a win for 2024, depending on where you are again. So maybe assuming a lot of the people are a little bit closer to the Augusta area and the mid-coast, things are looking really good. We've kind of had a great population collapse in this area. If you're a little bit further away, you know, the greater Old Town, Orono area and that upper Penobscot River corridor, that's where the bulk of the brown-tail problems are now. But anyways, yeah, we're not totally free of brown-tail damage in this area. As you can see, the Belgrade Lakes region still has some holdout areas, and kind of Camden and Rockport in the mid-coast kind of have some higher populations. But yeah, again, I'll show some maps of where we've been in the past couple of years in this recent outbreak. But as far as we can tell, we think we might be on the downward tail of that. So yeah, and in addition to things that might be useful to you, one of the things we do, and I'll dispel this myth that winter is a slow time for forest health and monitoring. We're doing a ton of work during the winter months. So one of the things we're working on is our brown tail moth winter web survey. We're about to launch that. And again, that comes with a map every year that kind of shows you the densities of the winter webs of brown tail moth that can tell you what populations might be like in your area in the following year. So, and that's something you guys can do too. So here's just a graphic demonstration of that. So as you can see, brown tail is something that is around and, has small flare-ups. But as far as, outbreak mode, we've really been in that for the past decade. And so you can see starting in 2015, we really had that first jump in defoliation, even though we've had some background defoliation in different places for, decades and decades. Brown tail has been in Maine for a long time, and it's been a problem for a long time, but it hasn't been really problematic for that past decade until that past decade. So yeah, you can see it's kind of a neat, peak there in 2021. And, this damage being reported here is what we're visually seeing during our aerial surveys. So obviously there can't be even more damage out there at lower levels in between places we can see. But this is the worst of the worst that's actually visible, at a couple thousand feet when we're doing our aerial surveys. So yeah, quite a stark decrease from 2023 to 2024, where we were, really had a hard time picking up any visual damage from the air. I mean, 2,000 acres compared to, 200,000 acres just a couple of years ago is nothing. So we're very grateful that this one is kind of quieting down a little bit. So hopefully it'll stay that way. We never know, but we'll see what the next couple of years bring. Again, this just kind of shows some of that contrast between the last 2 years, depending on where you are. So you can see Penobscot County, and really southern Penobscot County has been the star of the show in 2023. And yeah, just, dropping from several thousand acres or more than that to just over 800 visible in 2024 is great. So again, just a more local depiction of what's going on with brown tail moth, depending on what your county might be. Here's a nice color collage. Again, this is what we're observing during our aerial survey. So this is everything stacked up from 2019 to 2023. So as you can see, yeah, the focus has really been on the mid-coast area. And then in recent years, again, it's not a brand new problem up in the Penobscot River corridor in Old Town. It's been there for a couple of years, but it's kind of shifting that way now. And here's 2024. We're very hard pressed to find anything notable. I'm not sure how this is showing up on that big screen with the lighting, but again, some concentrated areas in that Old Town area that show up. But hopefully you can see even with the lighting that it's largely absent. So that's great. So we'll move on to spongy moth. So this is kind of in the win category somewhat, in that the population has crashed. So again, this one came on quick and was pretty intense for a couple of years. Most of this damage has happened in southern Oxford County, but it was a pretty typical outbreak for Maine in that it just spanned a few years. So we had a clear peak, and then a lot of times when these populations just get out of control, they are crashed by natural controls. They basically become so overpopulated that things like disease and pathogens are able to really spread through these populations quickly and help knock them back. Again, this is something that's always around. Depending on where you are, you may have this annually or have seen it more recently. But yeah, so you can see in that map on the left-hand side, we've got kind of, it's spanned longer than that 4 years, but that's the real core section of the damage there. So yeah, obviously, these areas in southern Oxford County, if you remember back a couple of years, if you're from there, there's been some really droughty seasons. Those areas are typical, very sandy soils, support a lot of oak, one of the preferred hosts of spongy moss. So it was really ripe conditions, between host and drought and, all those conditions for them to really boom over there. So if you look at this map, that dark pink color, that's the 2024 damage. So basically, there's no active defoliation that we know about. These caterpillar population have crashed. So what you're seeing there in that dark pink color that we documented this year during our aerial survey, that is actual tree mortality. So, this is one of the things that's been more damaging in recent times. So again, if you're out in southern Oxford County, you may well be, doing some salvage cleanup of some dead oaks. So again, in this area, red oak really bore the brunt of it for the hardwoods. But one of the things about spongy moth that's unfortunate is that really high populations can spill over from hardwood host to conifers. So things like pine and hemlock that don't recover well, like hardwood trees, really had a heavy impact on them as well. So there's certainly a lot of dead hemlock and pine mixed in this, in addition to that oak. So. But yeah, these things come and go. So hopefully we'll have, another decade or better of relative quiet, and then we'll see where this pops up the next time. So nothing new for Maine, but just a recent event on the radar. So now we'll go back to the loss categories. So forest tent cat. Has anybody traveled down from Aroostook County to be here today, or nobody? So. There were some earlier, but they knew to head out. So, anyways, so yeah, forest tent caterpillar. Again, this is, something that happens. So we've had some decreases in activity in 2 other defoliators, but now it's time that we're gonna have increased defoliation for forest tents. So again, most of this damage in recent years, you can see that timeline on the left. We basically have a doubling of acreage over the past 3 years, and most of it has been confined to northeastern Aroostook County. So despite this level of damage, compared to other parts of the state, northern Aroostook County has pretty normal precipitation over this time period. Up in this area, it's really favoring aspen. It will feed on other things, but it's really just singled out that aspen, at least from the airplanes. So a lot of that stuff has recovered. It's had a chance to refoliate, and there's been plenty of moisture. So we're not seeing any evidence of mortality or anything like that. So again, this is year 3 of significant damage. So we will see what next year brings, but we haven't had any of those reports yet indicating that stuff has already died. So, but the interesting thing that flared up in 2024 is if you look at that map over on the Quebec border in Somerset County, we actually have, a different scenario going on. And that picture in the lower right-hand corner is what's happening over there. So we'll get back to that. But anyways, hopefully that shows up reasonably well. But these are just a couple photos out the airplane of what things look like in northern Aroostook County. So you can see all that aspen mixed in with other species and stuff. They're really singling it out. And yeah, they're doing quite a good job of stripping it completely bare. But again, as far as we know, we've had good recovery up until now. So we'll see what, after a couple of years of defoliation, what we're going to get. So back to the Western Maine situation. So unlike up in northern Aroostook County, over here we're in maple syrup country. So we've seen this little outbreak pop up of forest tent actually going after sugar maple. So again, they can feed on a variety of things, and they've picked sugar maple as their preferred host over there. So in addition to our aerial survey, this is what we mapped, those black circles. A lot of this stuff is becoming visible, using some of these readily available satellite imagery programs that you can see day by day by day and stuff. So yeah, pretty large scale, pretty severe defoliation. Again, this stuff shows up really well on satellite imagery there, so you can see that. And here's some pictures of what, some of those sugar maple areas look like below the canopy in those areas. So we did some work with some landowners out there to provide them some information, do some egg mass surveys and stuff like that. There probably will be, aerial pesticide applications in these areas because this is a, commercial crop out there. These sugar maples are extremely valuable for producing syrup and stuff like that. So there's a high degree of interest in being really active and protecting them. So, but yeah, this is unfolding. So again, this is the first year of real significant damage in those Western Maine areas. We'll see what that brings. Again, there'll be treatment. I haven't heard of any proposed treatments for northern Aroostook where stuff is just affecting aspen. That's not necessarily a super important species for anything in particular. So yeah, we'll continue to keep an eye on this. We'll certainly have defoliation next year, and we'll see what we map from the airplane. So, okay, so we'll switch gears. We'll go to hemlock woolly adelgids. So, yeah, a few years ago, we did have quite a few new detections of towns. And so we wound up expanding our regulated areas. So you can see that hatched area is now the new extent of the regulated areas. We do quite a bit of survey each and every year. So fortunately, 2024 was pretty quiet in that we only found it in two new towns. So that's Parsonsfield over on the New Hampshire border, and that's Liberty in Waldo County. So I should have put some pictures of what the actual organism looks like, but a lot of people, in this group are probably well familiar with it. But this is one of those fabulous winter activities that we can get help from you to, see if your town is on this map, go out, survey your woodlot. And yeah, we're really obsessed with filling in maps now. That's kind of how we operate. So we're always looking for new towns, always looking for new counties. So yeah, if you think you have hemlock woolly adelgid on your property and it's in a town or a county not listed here, always phone that in. We want to know about it, and even if it is, we provide guidance on some things you can do with that. So yeah, that's an ongoing survey effort, and yeah, winter's a great time for that. A lot of the squirrels and porcupines are doing a lot of clipping of twigs and stuff, so you don't even have to put in a lot of effort. You're out walking the dog, you can easily, sometimes find evidence of hemlock woolly adelgid on these clipped twigs that are on the ground. So an easy thing to do to help us out. Talk a little bit about emerald ash borer. So yeah, year in and year out, we're still have an extensive monitoring program for emerald ash borer because it is one of the couple organisms that's still regulated here in Maine by state regulations. So things have been progressing pretty normally in southern Maine, but we had some, kind of unexpected activity in northern Maine. This purple prism trap program is one of our core programs. So we run about 200 traps every year, and we haven't seen any evidence of anything in the past 5 years. But 2024 was very active. So we had 6 different positive traps. Fortunately, in southern Maine, you can see those 3 that are highlighted. Those are in known areas. So, one of those is right in Waterville, where we know we have a population. The other 2 are in that Andover area. So we actually know we have a population there too. But it's nice to see that those traps are working. And then up in northern Aroostook County, likewise, we had 3 different positive traps, and those were pretty important finds because, as I mentioned, emerald ash borer is one of the things that is still regulated by the state here. So if you look at that right-hand map, you can see those southernmost 3 red circles. Those are those fines. And up until that point in time, the quarantine boundaries had been that blue area. You can kind of draw a line straight across and imagine where it was. But, in an effort to create a buffer area around those positive detections, we did have to expand our regulated area. So now in northern Aroostook, you can see it basically extends as far south as, Presque Isle and across. So that was unfortunate. This has been a very stable area with very slow spread for many years. So we were reluctant to do that, but we're glad at least those detections were kind of right on the boundary of that old quarantine zone. And hopefully this one will stick for a while. And people are aware enough in northern Maine about emerald ash borer that, hopefully there's good product handling going on up there. So girdle trap tree survey, this is another monitoring tool we can see. So as you can see, statewide program, we use this for a variety of reasons, to monitor spread. We also use this for assessing sites where we perform biological control. So sometimes we want to know if emerald ash borer is in a site, so we have a population that we can attempt to manage. But again, nothing positive in southern and central Maine from those trap trees this year. But if you look to the north, 2 more positive trees there. So this has been a really, important method in northern Maine in finding some of those detections where we have presumably lower populations than we do in southern Maine, where we're getting a lot of natural spread of emerald ash borer. We did pick up a green funnel trap survey again this year. This is something some years we do, some years we don't. So we wanted to take a look at some new areas so you can see all those locations on the map where we operated green funnel traps. So kind of, doing those along some popular traveled roads for tourism and stuff like that. So this was a fun program. We actually screened these samples right on the tailgate. So we had, real live data basically, and we can put stuff into data sets pretty quick now. So we had, up to date information every time we sampled. So, we wound up taking about 250 samples. Those were sampled every 2 weeks. And fortunately, none of those turned up positive. So hopefully that means EAB really is not in any of these areas. As I mentioned, biological control. So this is one of the things we're doing to combat EAB. So we have a program going for quite a few years now, and it's interesting now we've had the program in place for long enough where we can stop releasing biological control agents, and assuming that they're reproducing themselves, we can start to monitor for them. So we kind of were concerned for a couple years there. We were having a really hard time recovering these, and they are notoriously very difficult to recover. But now we're starting to do that. So we can see that we have self-sustaining populations of these biocontrol agents in some of these areas where EAB has been for a while. And so that's great news. That means we can focus our attention on moving release sites to other infested areas and try to spread those biological control agents far and wide across the landscape into all areas where emerald ash borer is, to, just add another piece of some level of management to assist us with reducing spread rates. So, all right. Switching gear from EAB. So yeah, 2024 in comparison to 2023 and 2022 was just a really great year for aerial survey. We had really great conditions. In the past years, we've been dealing with weather at the times we need to fly, wildfire smoke, and just not been able to get up at the right time. So a lot of these defoliators are pretty time sensitive for detecting that damage. So unfortunately, yeah, winter moth seemed like it did really well this year. Whether or not that was just a matter that we really got flight times in at the right time and were able to see that. But there's a classic example of defoliation in the mid coast there. So you can see all those pink polygons. It's over quite a widespread area. But we're working on biological control for that as well. The way that program works, basically, there's this parasitoid fly, Sizenis albicans. They'll lay eggs on leaves that winter moth is feeding on. They'll actually ingest them. Those are what the caterpillars look like on the left. And when they go to pupate, those fly larvae will develop and pupate inside of them. So each and every year we go out and we collect as many of these caterpillars as we can at different sites. We rear them to maturity, and then we send the caterpillar pupae down to University of Massachusetts Amherst, where in the lab there they can determine whether they're parasitized or not. So they return to us just the parasitized pupae, which we then stick out in the woods, and then we let them emerge the next year. So same concept as emerald ash borer. We're trying to release these biological control agents in the, areas with the worst problems. This one's a little bit more rigorous, because we're doing this work ourselves. So we manage about one release site a year based on what's available to us. But you can see we've spread them around Maine as well as possible. For example, the biological control programs for emerald ash borer are provided by the federal government, so that's a much easier lift just to get them in the mail. But anyways, we've got quite a few release sites going around the state. You can see from those round graphics there, we have some of those show percent parasitism. So some of them are small, but some of them are having pretty high numbers. So that's great. And again, they've been doing this for a much longer time in Massachusetts. And if you look down there to the southern purple dots on that map, you can see that they really are not having a lot of problems down there because that program's been really successful. So hopefully we're working towards that in Maine as well. Okay, now we'll jump over down east. So red pine scale is another thing that's been going on, and this has actually been getting a lot of attention in other states, public press releases and reports lately. So I don't know if folks pay attention to things happening in Vermont, New York, New Hampshire, probably. So, but yeah, this is one of those things that's kind of a regional problem, and it's been going on for a number of years, but it's kind of, yeah, ramping up in Maine, and specifically those down east areas. So Here are some examples of observations we've seen during aerial surveys. So, yeah, let's see. So we had 1,800 acres of red pine scale damage documented during aerial survey in 2024. So that's certainly up. And again, as you can see, most of these affected areas are down east, and then they seem to be associated with, areas surrounding blueberry environments. So it might be a site or a condition of that. Not sure about that yet. But yeah, one of the problems with a lot of the work we do is it's really difficult to monitor some of the things we monitor. So we tried this new program. So these red pine scales are tiny, tiny insects, and the crawlers are, you can see there in that illustration there, just how insanely tiny they are, and trying to figure out whether these things are actively causing these problems, whether they're just associated with these problems. That's been one of the questions, because we see all this red pine decline and mortality in other states, and sometimes you can't find any evidence of red pine scale, sometimes you can. So still a little bit of uncertainty, but more and more it's looking like that red pine scale really is playing a role in what's going on, and that makes sense, of course. But anyways, we tried this fun new program with these sticky slides. So basically coat them in Vaseline, put them in stands where you're trying to determine whether red pine scale is present or not, take them back to the lab and try to, figure out if that little tiny insect is on that messy slide full of all sorts of things. So anyways, so we gave it a go. It was a very difficult thing to try. I don't think we had great results. I'm not sure what Gabe's plans are for doing that again. So anyways, actually, no, you can see there, traps did recover some crawlers in areas that didn't actually have any active symptoms. So maybe that's, a useful thing for early detections, because once some of these symptoms appear, these red, dying red pine, it's kind of too late for any management there. So, here's just a summary of the areas that are affected and some of the work. Our entomologist, Gabe LeMay, has been doing this stuff out of Old Town, so he gave me this information. So that's kind of the areas he's interested in, and yeah, it has big implications. There's a lot of areas in Washington and Hancock County with just huge acreages of plantation red pine and stuff, where there's some serious concerns. So it would be great if there was a way to determine this stuff early on, so folks have a chance at doing some management proactively if they need to. All right, now we'll switch over to pathology. Hopefully I won't stumble through any of this stuff, but our pathologist is in the room if need be. So beech leaf disease, I'll do a show of hands. Is everybody familiar and everybody have beech leaf disease? Yeah, most people. So if you don't, pay attention. Yeah, this is one of those things where, there's been some strides, but there is still just a ton that is unknown about beech leaf disease. So as you can see, it's spreading extremely rapidly for any pest or disease, and that's what the national map looks like now, and they just keep expanding it pretty rapidly. So only has a short history here in Maine, but as you can see, it's spread to just about every county except Franklin. So if anybody here lives in Franklin County, keep an eye out for this. We want to fill in that map and just be done with it so we can walk away. So I've been pestering other people, but no, in all seriousness, yeah, sometimes it's hard to detect, the reason stands it is up there. So we just need to find it. But yeah, unfortunately, again, the mechanisms of spread are still poorly understood themselves. But yes, now some of the research and work has shifted towards some of the potential treatments. So, we've become involved in a couple things. So one of those is a soil drench with a phosphite fertilizer. And then, yeah, we are getting involved with another one that actually involves trunk injections of trees to manage for this. So again, these are, studies that are kind of part of larger studies. We're doing a lot of work with the U.S. Forest Service as they're investigating some of this stuff. So there's really, no definitive results, but yeah, people are very interested in just trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't work, so we can try to at least work towards some sort of management solutions for beech leaf disease. So Again, getting back to all the things we can be doing in winter, you know, beech tends to hold a lot of leaves, and the banding that's characteristic for beech leaf disease. Sometimes you get lucky. This stuff is visible all winter long, and you know, beech can be easier to find. Affects all sizes of trees. There's no size class, so you know, a lot of this stuff is visible right at eye level, or you know, you might have to look down. You know, it gets little tiny sprouts and stuff as well. So again, another thing when you're walking your woodlots in winter, be looking for hemlock woolly adelgid, beech leaf disease, woodpeckers attacking ash trees. All these things, you know, can show up in winter and tell you what's going on. Um, this you probably won't get into yourself, but this is something Aaron's done too. Is you know, kind of another early detection thing, is actually looking at the buds of beech over the winter. You know, the causal agent or the primary associate with beech leaf disease is actually a nematode. So kind of a new frontier for a lot of us. That's not really a typical forest pest that anybody has really dealt with. But yeah, they wind up mining and attacking buds very early on in bud development of beech. So hopefully those pictures show up okay, but you can actually detect some of this damage by dissecting these buds under the scope and soaking them in water. So yeah, that actually shows up. I can see that from here. So that's the sort of needle in the haystack you're looking for sometime, is a nematode inside a beech bud that you've dissected. So in the spirit of, yeah, trying to find really tiny things that cause really big problems, yeah, that's an elegant example of that. Um, Again, going back to filling in maps, you know, landowners have been huge in this. You saw that national map, that's kind of countywide. Here's our local Maine map. So again, this is breaking it up by towns and stuff, and you can see all those red points are things we've picked up in our surveys. So yeah, again, if you're in a general area, there's a pretty good chance if you go out looking for it, you'll find it. But yeah, so many of those reports have come in from landowners, and yeah, you can see it's kind of radiated. Ground zero is Lincolnville in the mid coast there, and yeah, it kind of has a radiating pattern. But yeah, we continue to survey for that, and those towns continue to drop, unfortunately. So there's some of the stats on the right hand side for um, you know, the ongoing effort, unfortunately. Another huge level, um, landscape level problem is white pine needle damage. So um, yeah, people might forget that pine trees don't really typically look like that on the right, but we've been dealing with this problem for so long that your search image might be a little bit altered. So is there anybody in the room here that saw a white pine that looked good in 2024 anywhere in the state? Is this a familiar image for everybody in this room? So yeah, this was going back to aerial survey. You know, we have a lot of stuff going on in 2024, and this was just overwhelming to the fact, you know, this is really statewide, and it's really affecting every white pine tree we can look at. So sometimes, you know, you have a nice big grove of white pine and you can circle this on the aerial survey map, but a lot of times it's single trees, and it really seemed to be most trees statewide. So we got some help here from our friends at U.S. Forest Service, you know, and again, this is kind of getting into that, you know, new available technologies realm, and you can look at that map on the left. So again, playing with aerial imagery, time sliders and stuff like that, and seeing what stuff looks like from one day. You know, we can feed them the time window when this damage was the worst. So again, these needles become discolored, and then they're hanging on the tree for a short while. Most of them drop, so it's a very short window to really observe this stuff. And again, it's less friendly from aerial survey. A lot of this stuff is in the lower crown, so you could have some severely affected trees and really not be too aware from above because of that visual mask of the upper canopy. But anyways, people more talented than us have played with the technology, and you can see that model on the left there, you know, for what was potentially affected. And I don't remember what we mapped for acreage from aerial survey. Again, it was overwhelming to the point where it was every tree. But you know, they're estimating, depending on how you look at this model, you know, anywhere from 600,000 to 800,000 acres of white pine affected by this stuff. So again, you can see it's truly statewide. So yeah, there's some really large scale issues happening, and yeah, we're continuing to document this stuff. Some things there's not a terrible amount of stuff to do about, but it's good to know that, a lot of white pine out there is in poor health, and that might affect some other, management decisions you might be considering. Is there mortality happening that's attributed straight to?
Here you go.
Thanks. Right. Something like drought could be one of those conditions that pushes the trees past what they can bear in terms of stress. And so that's what we're worried about. That's what we're keeping an eye out for.
How long do you expect that to be? How long do you expect that to be around?
We really don't know. These are, and I want to make this point clear. Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Aaron Bergdahl, Maine Forest Service. I'm the forest pathologist. So the question was, how long is this going to be around? And I want to stress that these are native pathogens. So this isn't something that came from overseas. So it's kind of a new situation. We're used to some things like emerald ash borer that came from Asia, and our trees aren't adapted to it. I believe that, these new patterns in climate that are favoring factors that drive the disease cycles of these diseases, these new climate scenarios are kind of what's driving this. So it's anybody's guess. It's been around. We started documenting it back in 2011, I believe it was, or even earlier. Okay, 2006. And it's really gotten quite bad in these past couple of years. I think I'm probably 4 years in a row I've said, wow, this is the worst I've ever seen. So last year was particularly bad. The reason it was bad this year is because we had a really wet spring last year. So the nature of the disease cycle is really determined, or the severity of the disease is determined by precipitation during spore dispersal the year previous. So spring weather conditions are a good predictor of what you're going to see in terms of severity the following year. But yeah.
Good stuff. So yeah, Aaron makes a great point that everything we're working on is part of a tag team effort. So, there's never just one thing affecting a tree or a group of trees. It's now 3, 4, 5 things simultaneously that are all contributing to just overall stress. So, all right. Moving on to European large canker. This did come from overseas in the pathology world, but this has been here for a very long time. So yeah, there's been some newly generated interest in the past couple of years and doing some more extensive survey and stuff for this. So I don't have the previous quarantine boundaries on there, but yeah, this is actually a regulated pathogen here in the state of Maine. So yeah, we did some survey work, or Aaron did some survey work rather, and yeah, there were some new detections of European large canker outside of that regulated zone. So back in 2023. Yeah, we did a multi quarantine update. So 2023 was a year of big expansion for emerald ash borer, hemlock, woolly delegate, and European large canker. So a lot of that survey work went into, redefining what those real quarantine areas needed to be and stuff. So this is the result of that work. So again, this survey work is ongoing. Another thing that's hampered by issues we're dealing with in terms of, just changing climates and stuff like that. So one of the best times to do this is winter as well. But a lot of these habitats where larch grows or, require frozen ground, and we're just not getting that to get out into these places safely and have a good close-up look at some of these symptoms we might see from far away and be able to diagnose them. So yeah, this does really require a up close look to figure out some of this stuff. But again, we've had a pretty good cold snap here, so hopefully we'll get out and do some of this this winter survey work while the conditions last, and hopefully it won't warm up too quickly again. So and now we'll change gear and we'll go over to jumping worms and have a look at this map. So Yeah, as you can see, jumping worms, I'm sure is an issue that many folks in this room are familiar with. And yeah, this has been around for a while. You can see on that map, 2023 was really the year of the jumping worm. It was in all these places, but yeah, we really had a lot of survey efforts. So after doing a huge push on that, I feel like we have a good distribution of it. So now, it becomes more important again, to get those landowner reports to kind of fill in some of these finer scale things and see where jumping worms really exist in Maine. But anyways, yeah, like I said, 2023 put 95 new towns on the map with that big survey effort. And now, yeah, logically, when we have all those new finds, new finds have slowed down for 2024. So just those couple, but yeah, we're still out there looking, and yeah, we encourage everybody to look and report that to us so we can really keep these maps up to date. So, um, can I explain jumping worms a little? Okay, yeah, I guess I didn't know how much time and how familiar people would be. So yeah, basically jumping worms is, it's an invasive group of species, and the real concern is just their behavior and, how fast they turn over leaf litter and stuff like that. So they really are, sucking a lot of nutrients out of the forest. So some of the symptomology you want to look for, I've heard their castings, compared to things like coffee grounds and stuff like that. So you'll have a lot of bare ground with a lot of that, activity. And, if you spend enough time out in the woods, you can kind of tell, what, leaves that normal level of normal earthworm activity and stuff. As for the worms themselves, I'm not skilled in IDing them, but there are some diagnostic characters, physically looking at them, but a less reliable but somewhat reliable characters, the way they get their names, jumping worms. If you try to handle them, they are, very much writhing and trying to jump out of your hands and stuff. So, if you've spent enough time playing with worms as a kid, you'll know that that's not something you've seen before. If your kids bring you that, and it's behaving that way. So yeah, there's a working group shared between us and some other groups, because jumping worms don't necessarily fit in neatly into any category of, forest health. So, we have Brittany is one of our team members on that groups, but it's a big concern for, horticulture and nursery stuff. The cocoons are impossible to see, so obviously they get around in soil. So yeah, everybody should be very, very careful about, importing compost, importing soil, those concerns about, washing off the tractor tires and ATVs and stuff. Like, that stuff's really real now. You can't really get away with some of that stuff anymore, or else you're in for big problems. And yeah, just another general stressor that can destroy forest litter and, leave your trees kind of starved for nutrients and exposed to some, ground level disturbances that they don't need.
Questions. I wondered, I've had two experiences that were the same. One was in Falmouth and one was in Sebago, and I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to identify an ash tree with emerald ash for infection. And both circumstances were the same. The trees were fairly large, fairly old, and at the bottom of the tree, below, the top, the bottom 12 feet perhaps, the bark looked like it had been kind of stripped off or something. And then I looked up in the tree and there was a woodpecker at the top. And I wondered if that was enough to conclude that that might well be a tree infected by EAB, or if the bark has nothing to do with the
Oh, no, absolutely. So yeah, like you said, to know that you're on the right track, you are on the right track. So, you can look at a couple pieces of evidence. So first, if you're familiar with those maps and you're in an EAB area, it's going to be pretty obvious. The thing before you started talking about the woodpecker damage, I kind of thought you were describing a different phenomenon. There's a thing called smooth bark disease that tends to affect the lower boles of big trees and stuff like that, and that's kind of variable in different areas. So the best pieces of evidence, yeah, woodpeckers when they really, really heavily attack a tree, there's definitely insect activity in there. It's pretty easy to imagine woodpecker damage or, see bark rubs from branches and stuff like that. So, yeah, but in heavily infested trees, usually you can get damage low enough where you can detect it at ground level. So yeah, D-shaped holes, the real slam dunk is to be able to peel bark and look below and see the galleries, because there are native borers that can have pretty high populations in ash trees, that woodpeckers could be interested in too, or ash bark beetles. So yeah, you can be pretty sure, but until you get visual evidence through looking at some life stage of the insect, there are some other things. So
Thank you.
but yeah, we're in the age of cell phone pictures and emails, so just send that stuff to me. I'll tell you in 2 seconds. So. Or he's got the mic first.
I've had several people tell me that, proclaim to me that all these various insects coming into Maine from elsewhere would be happening even if there were not climate change. In other words, they're trying to suggest that maybe there's not much climate change involved, or not necessarily for this kind of infestation. And I tried to claim to them that underlying it is climate change.
Yeah, we'll give you the example of southern pine beetle. So southern pine beetle it's a native to North America, but it's behaving invasively in the Northeast as it invades new climates. So it is one of the bark beetles that's quite cold sensitive, and yeah, cold climates have kept it at bay. And now it's expanding into southern Maine. We have it. So on a different scale, I mean, things that have historically hugged the coast because of, moderated winter climates are really getting, further inland. So hemlock woolly adelgid is making inroads into, interior Maine. A lot of these cold sensitive insects, like red pine scale, a lot of these small sucking insects that don't move once they begin feeding are some of the ones that are more susceptible to cold, and, they're becoming bigger and bigger problems. Spongy moth, yeah, so I mean, we can look at spongy moth. I mean, snow cover is affecting survivability of egg masses and stuff like that at low ground levels. I mean, there are certain things like emerald ash borer, we're not going to experience cold enough temperatures in Maine probably ever again to have a impact on their population. So, there's both groups. There are some invasives that climate here is not going to be a problem. They're not going to be helped or, defeated by it. And there are some that it has true effects. And I don't think it's hard to think of multiple examples pretty easily now. We're past that point where maybe not, but I believe it. So.
Right here, and then.
Oops, sorry.
I've got a real quick question about this jumping worm stuff. You say rinsing off equipment. Most of the time when you're leaving the woods, you don't have any way to rinse it off. Is there, if you have it on a trailer, you brought it home, bleach or anything else that you can do that will kill what has just come home with your equipment?
Good question. I'm sure somebody's working on some fancy contraptions out there. I mean, maybe trying to do that stuff on a durable surface if you have paved areas and stuff. If you don't have anything but, dirt driveway and stuff like that. I mean, it's a great question. I'm not super experienced in some of the mitigation techniques, but I think a lot of that is just being aware whether something's present, and then, maybe you can prepare for having that ability to do something before you get home. So even going to the commercial car wash, I don't know. So.
Yes, when you showed the map of the new EAB infestations up in the county after the area up in the St. John Valley had been stable for quite a few years. Nope, it was even an earlier one than that. Wait a minute, I'm sorry, no,
You
that
want
was
that one?
that one right there. Now, it looks to me on the map, but I don't know if your map was intended to show this, that the new infestations, that there's a gap of uninfested areas between the stable populations that have been there for quite a few years and these newly found ones. Is there a gap of uninfested areas
I should explain the symbology on this map better. Thanks for pointing that out. So, yeah, basically emerald ash borer is, like many things, very, very difficult to find. So kind of the rule of thumb we use that, we've seen people have learned as it's spread across the country is each one of those red dots on that map is a 3-mile buffer around a positive point. So, that's an individual tree we know about. So we're assuming within a 3-mile area, it's very likely that emerald ash borer exists at levels where it's not detectable to us. Beyond that, those orange zones are 10-mile buffers. And so in those areas, there's still a pretty good chance that emerald ash borer is in those areas at very low population densities. So a lot of what we base our data on is point data. And yeah, that's the best we can do to kind of model it from other people's experiences of what might actually be infested versus not. So these are not, unique things. Likely, all this stuff is connected, but it just takes a while. I mean, even in southern Maine, I mean, we know we have it up in Herman and Newport and Waterville and down Lewiston, Auburn, and stands to reason those things are connected, but we can't find the evidence yet. We haven't gotten the reports or had the visual evidence to really, just be concrete on a map.
Okay, because my concern, next part is, uh, do you folks believe that these new infestations were by natural spread or assisted by transport of infected material?
In northern Maine, I'm gonna kind of assume they're natural spread. It's impossible to say. I mean, even when we have satellite infestations show up in the middle of nowhere and we're pretty sure it's human spread, a lot of times it's really hard to go back and document that, because that wood pile's gone or whatever. Like this stuff takes years to show up. So, those are new infestations, but EAB has been there for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and now it's visible. So yeah, the term new infestation is kind of hard. So it's relatively new. We know about it new, but it's been there. So
Such mobile, good flyers, right?
Tom asked about their flight capabilities. So yeah, they're able flyers. Kind of the rule of thumb is they'll given their own up to their own devices, they'll spread a mile or two a year on their own. So there's no question when we look at a national scale, this is all human mediated movement because, the math says it would take hundreds of years to get from ground zero in Michigan to Maine, and it took 20. So yeah, it's always a combination of two, and that's why we're still enforcing these quarantines. And yeah, I mean, literally, it was last week, we had a load of EAB infested wood from Connecticut confiscated on the highway, so people still aren't getting it. A lot of people are, which is great. It's getting easier, but fortunately, yeah.
You didn't mention what's probably the worst pest statewide year in, year out, the balsam woolly adelgid.
Oh, you're gonna call me on balsam woolly adelgid. Yep. So, yeah, what do we know about balsam woolly adelgid? Yeah, stands to reason it's one of the most damaging forest pests out there. Some of the reasons I think it doesn't get notoriety is because it affects balsam. A lot of people aren't concerned about that. Yeah, there has been some recent conversation between some states. We talked to New Hampshire about what they're seeing and stuff. Again, that's one of the ones, has tended to be a coastal problem in Maine, but we do know it's active in a lot of places. And I can't remember, but we did document it in aerial survey, actually, a 40 or 50 acre, parcel, and figured out that's what it was. I'm not sure, somewhere in western Maine. But yeah, as far as what we know about it and keeping track, we know it's statewide. I know the Spruce Budworm Lab at Maine is actually keeping tabs on balsam woolly adelgid crawlers that they find to kind of maybe get back into the habit of population tracking and stuff like that. But yeah, it's something that's widespread, not always very apparent, so we don't have the best data set on it, I'll say. So sorry. I'll look into it for you. Well, it's the slow burn versus the explosion, right? So the things that are happening fast in front of your eyes just tend to get the the attention. So, but I agree. Yeah, it's definitely, if you took a careful look at it, and maybe somebody is, I don't know, but, yeah, certainly that's one that tackles a lot of trees, so.
Other questions? I could just say on the lands that this organization owns, we've made management changes over the last couple of years because of some of these. Like Emerald Ash Borer, we have made a decision that when we're operating on a site, and this is something we would not do 5 years ago, if we're there and there's a log ash tree, because we don't expect to be back there for 20 years, we are taking that log tree out. And because we don't believe 20 years from now that tree will survive.
Yep.
So we're leaving the younger ash trees and things, but we're taking that, we would normally leave those. And the other thing on white pine, on our lands, the number one, by far the number one species on the lands that are in our land trust is white pine. And we're spending a lot of time looking at our white pine stands and saying, we need to get in there, do some more thinning, get those opened up a little bit, get some airflow, make sure you get the, vigorous trees, partly because of the white pine, the needle drop, and just making sure that those are healthy trees and early intervention and try to get some airflow and dry some of those sites out. So that's just stuff we've done in the last 3 or 4 years that's changed. And so I think maybe the message is that there's a management ways to operate. Part of it, the solution is managing around these changes as they show up. Right?
Yeah. And I should mention, while this map just happens to be up too, part of the reason for these buffers is thinking about your management actions and thresholds. So, we kind of say, if you're in that orange zone within 10 miles of a known infestation, if you're thinking about, having some sort of harvest, and yeah, for example, you do have, log quality ash, like that's the time to get them out, because they won't be around the next time. So.
And I will say that the Forest Service, the USDA dropped the quarantines on EAB because they didn't think they were going to be effective. The Forest Service insisted on retaining the EAB, the quarantines, in part to give landowners an up to reduce the spread or shorten or lengthen out the time that landowners are having a chance to do something, right, and be prepared for what's inevitably coming on EAB, right?
Oh yeah, we supported it, but I mean, that's the result of the public comment process. So the people of Maine demanded that. So, and yeah, we've considered, at what point do we think about deregulating? And each and every time that kind of comes up in discussion, it seems like people are still very interested. And, compared to some other states, I think some of these regulations, they might be a pain like all regulations, but they seem to have, had some good effect in our timeline compared to some states that, deregulated immediately and are just, edge to edge covered in emerald ash borers. So.
And on that map, I don't know if people can see it, but I think the green dots shows the concentration of ash, correct?
Yep, correct.
And it's kind of a band right through the center of the state. And most of that's small ownership.
Yep.
So the big charge of ash in the state of Maine is that central band and made up of largely small ownerships.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of the ash basal area of Maine is within a quarantine boundary now. It does not mean because it's in that quarantine boundary, it's affected by EAB. So yeah, keep in mind, there's still a lot of good work to be done as far as managing ash. Just because you're in the zone doesn't mean it's a lost cause. So.
Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep. So I think that concludes our program. It is recorded, right? So it'll all be online, correct? Yeah, that's what I mean. The presentations, everything will be online, right?
Yeah, so the annual meeting webpage that we keep our information about this event on will have all the presentations available. We'll have the recording of this event. And any documents associated with the presentation. But be in touch with me if you need anything else, or if you would like to be in touch with any of the presenters. They love us because they can be in touch with woodland owners. We're a great connector, so just let me know what you need. I have a hand raised, but you don't have a microphone, but go ahead. Yes, the slides will be available. Thank you for the clarification. Yep, the slide presentations will be available on the website. The recording and any associated documents will be linked to the webpage. Doug?
Okay, I think that's, unless there's some burning question, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next year. So.
You got the bloody right to say. You got the bloody right to say. The right to say.